my honor and pleasure to be able to part of the conference. Today, I'm going to talk about how to engage our students in inquiry in the era of competency education. You just heard from the presentation a lot about the OECD 2030, so I hope you can make some connections between what you just heard and what I'm going to talk about today. So today I'm going to talk about the background very briefly. I'm going to talk about the inquiry, but I want to talk about why inquiry is so much emphasized. And then I will show you some of the social studies curriculum documents, and then I will share some of the instructional practices that were done in the US, Australia, and Korea. And then I'm going to conclude with a couple of remarks and then questions. So inquiry is being so much emphasized right now, and I want to let's take a look at the definition from the OECD's report that was published in 2005. Actually, Miho was just talking about the OECD 2030, and OECD's 2030, I think it is a kind of follow-up of the OECD 2000. OECD's the project that was done from 1997 to 2003. And now the competency became a very big word in the area of education since the publication of the DESECO project report. And in the report, it says that competence is more than just the knowledge and skills. It involves the ability to meet complex demands and in a particular context. And in the second line, you can also see that it's an ability to mobilize knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values to engage in and engage with and act in the world. So from the first phrase, you will be able to see that the competency is goals-oriented, but at the same time, the competency is context-dependent. And I bolded the reflective approach, because sometimes we have to think about how are we going to help our students to be able to solve problems creatively or critically. Then we have to focus on the reflective approaches. And also we have to think about what knowledge, what skills, what values and attitudes should be taught so that our students can be successful in their own way. And as Miho also mentioned, the OECD's competency projects has a lot to do with social responsibility for the welfare of others and the society as a whole. And also it emphasizes the social integration among individuals from various backgrounds, and then the fullest development of our students. So it's not a behavioristic approach, it's more about the holistic approach. And some of the definitions are a little bit vary according to who is talking about or what institutions are talking about. However, there are common characteristics that go through different definitions. The first one is that it is a holistic development. It's not just the knowledge or the skills. Definitely the cognitive elements or domains are very important, but they must be integrated with non-cognitive aspects, such as motivation and values or inner beliefs. So it's a very complex system of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And as you could see from the previous presentation, it takes the growth mindset. So the competency is not like you possess the competency or not. It's more about the developmental process. So everyone has a competency, but we are trying to help our students be able to develop the competency at their fullest level. So it is focusing a lot on the growth of learning experiences. And what is also interesting is that the growth is facilitated by reflective thinking. I think that's why reflective approach is so much emphasized. And the competency is demonstrated. It is manifest in performance. Performance means like learning by doing. You are doing but you are doing not just for or through thinking. So it's not just doing something. When you are doing something or when you are acting on something, you have to utilize your own thinking skills. And when I was talking about the developmental process, I should mention that it is a developmental process. So you may say, okay, the individual development. However, we also have to be reminded that the developmental process is also facilitated through the interaction with others. That's why the collaboration or the collaborative problem solving is so much emphasized in the competency education. And if I think many of you are aware of the new curriculum that was developed in the 2015. In Korea, we developed the 2015 revised national curriculum, and then we introduced the 6 different key competencies. I'm not going to read everything, but you will see that the competencies tap into different aspects of people's ability. Like from the self-management competency, it's more about like self-management skills, and the knowledge and information skills is more cognitive aspects of the competencies. But like the aesthetic and emotional, it is geared toward more the social emotional development or the social emotional skills. And the civic competency is definitely focusing on how you are interacting with the people who has different backgrounds. So the 6 key competencies are all interrelated together. Actually, there are 2 different dimensions in the competency. One we are calling a general competency. Sometimes people call it key competency. So the general competency is cross-curricular. And another type of competency is called the subject-specific or subject-related competency. So in the 2015 revised curriculum, we were trying to combine both. So from the previous slide, you saw the 6 key competencies that were laid out in the national curriculum framework. So the key competencies are like the umbrella. So those are the societal referenced or cross-curricular general competencies. However, the general competencies are not developed without subjects. So in order to develop the key competencies, each subject identified what the key competencies should be emphasized in each subject. So what it means to be capable in mathematics, what it means to be competent in language arts, what does it mean to be competent in, let's say, music. So in that way, we have to think about what they should be able to do as a learning outcome. Because the performance is so much emphasized in the competence-based education, we are not just thinking about what fun activities should be included in the curriculum. We have to think about what knowledge, what skills, and what values should be taught. But at the same time, we should be able to identify what our students should be able to do as a result of integrating knowledge, skills, and the values. So that's why we try to integrate both the cross-curricular and the subject-specific competencies. And based on the characteristics and the definitions of competency, we provide guidelines for instruction and assessment. As you can see, in the teaching and learning, we emphasize in-depth understanding of core ideas. And I will talk more about the core ideas later. And the curriculum integration. So curriculum integration within a subject and also the across subjects. And collaborative problem solving, authentic learning is very important. When you are learning about something, if you are learning it without context, then it makes us too hard to transfer what they learned in real life or in different situations. That's why authentic learning is very much emphasized. And the self-directed learning and differentiated instruction, definitely, because the competency is developmental, so we should be able to tailor to our students' different needs. And the assessment, we made it very clear that the purpose of assessment is not to measure their learning outcomes. It's more about to improve teaching and learning quality. So instead of just doing the assessment of learning, which was done traditionally, we are trying to focus more on the assessment for learning and assessment as learning. So this is kind of the background. And then I will show you how other countries laid out their curriculum. I will just use the example of the social studies. In the United States, you can see that it is called the C3 framework: college, career, and civic. And if you take a look at how it is organized, you will see that it is kind of the inquiry process. So in the first dimension, you will be able to see like developing questions and planning inquiries, applying disciplinary tools and concepts, evaluating sources and using evidence. And the last one is communicating conclusions and taking informed action. So the curriculum itself was organized in the inquiry process. And if you take a look at the Singapore, in the number 3, I highlighted in yellow. So they say like inquiry should be a big part of teaching and learning. So when you are teaching and when your students are learning, it should be done through inquiry. And if you take a look at the Ontario's curriculum, it's under the content. So the program in social studies, history, and geography, you will see the curriculum expectations, the strengths, and then you will see the inquiry processes along with the spatial skills. So the inquiry became a pretty big word in this document. And in Australia, you will also see under the overview, like the rationale, aims. Under the structure, you will see the knowledge and understanding, which has a lot to do with the knowledge component. And it also says inquiry and the thinking, inquiry and the skills strengths. What about Korea? We are kind of following the same, not the same, but kind of similar but different approaches. Our curriculum is organized in this way. First of all, we are stating what this subject is about. So the nature of the subject, and then we put some of the general goals. And in the beginning, I mentioned in order to develop the competencies, we should make decisions. What is worth teaching in terms of knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes. So we created a content matrix. So the core concepts are like the anchoring ideas, so that the facts can be organized around the core concepts. And you will be able to also see the skills. So the skills are more about the practices, what they should be able to do the social studies. So the skills and the competencies are very much aligned. And in the guideline for the teaching and learning, in the subject of social studies, it says you use questioning to foster inquiry and provoke student thinking, incorporate the social issues in teaching and learning, and provide opportunities for students to explore and analyze social issues, and help students solve social problems with empathy and understanding based on empirical data. So these are some of the guidelines that were put in the curriculum documents. But sometimes people criticize and like, okay, the document is just a document. It might not happen in the classrooms. So I visited a couple of schools in the US and one school in Australia. I made some classroom observations and did some interviews with the school teachers and did the focus group interviews with the Korean social studies teachers. So this school is located in LA in the United States. It is not a private school. It is not in a wealthy area. A majority of the students are from immigrants, and they are, in terms of the socio-economic status, it's very low. And by the way, it was named after the first Korean medalist in the Olympic Games, so that's why Dr. Samuel Lee is the name of the school. And I visited I made a couple of classroom observations. And when I went to the second grade classroom, they were learning about history, but the topic was about the family history. So the teacher does not open the textbook. So it starts with the kind of the inquiry or the essential questions. How do we learn from history? How is life different today? How can we put events in order? So like the first one, how do we learn from history? It has a lot to do with what historians do, but also it has a lot to do with the nature of historical work. But it also emphasizes that we are not learning history to be a historian. But from the second and the third one, you can see, okay, we are learning history because they have some connections, relations to the present. So how is life different today, and how can we put events in order? The last one is the chronological thinking skills. And then they made it like the family trees. I think this is something that we do a lot in our classrooms. But the students, the second graders, also interviewed their family members and their relatives. So they used the interview data as a source. And then they also gather data like from their pictures or other images. And then they construct a narrative of their family history. So, and you can see that the genre of the narrative is something that is also taught in the language arts. So the integration between history and the language arts was made. And I also went to the 5th grade classroom. They were also learning about history, and actually they were learning about the colonial time during, learning about the colonial period. And they were also writing historical narrative, but from the perspective of people who used to live in England, so that they can see, okay, the history can be described, or history can be made based on who is writing it, or the history it's not just an encyclopedia, it's not just a collection of the facts. They should be able to see, okay, it's more of the interpretation of the facts. By the way, everyone has a tablet PC or the laptop computer, which was, I think, very interesting. Everyone has one. And then they are very able to access two different sources of data. And I also visited one middle school in LA. And they were actually learning about political science. The main theme was the changing meaning of freedom. And the second one was the change through growth and the conflict. The students were, by the way, the day before we visited was the election day. So they were almost thrilled about, but also concerned about the results. And the teacher definitely made the connection between what they saw in the previous day and what they are learning in. They did lots of discussion about the electoral vote or electoral college, if that should be also valid or not. And then they completed an essay about what they found out. And as I said, everyone has a tablet PC, and the teacher already put lots of information, graph, or the data in the web page, in the folder or the web page that the students, where the students can see. So it was much more interactive, and students already know what they should be knowing. That's why the discussion was done very effectively. And in the 8th grade social studies, they were learning about Western African music. But it's not a music class, it was a social studies class. But they were using the sources from the Western African music, and then they were talking about how the Western African music influenced our world today. So they were able to give some examples in songs and the art they see, and then they definitely integrated the art components into their research-based writings, and then they did an African mask project. And the last one that I visited was located in Melbourne in Australia. It's a Catholic school, but it is a local public school, so do not think that it's a private school. As you could see, they have the general competencies like we do have the key competencies. And the second thing, you will see the Victorian curriculum learning areas, which corresponded to the subject areas that we teach in classrooms. And they developed their own school curriculum, and they identified some of the concepts that go across the subjects. I think this curriculum is kind of similar to the IB curriculum, the International Baccalaureate. So the themes were like the change, community, relationship, and the environment. So those were the 4 big themes. And so the thing that I just showed you is about how the curriculum was organized around the 4 themes. But when the teachers are planning their instruction, they are using a planner, so-called inquiry planner. It starts from what do I think? What do others think? Why do others think that? What does the Catholic Church think? What do I think now? So this is kind of the inquiry cycle. I will show you some of the examples from here. Actually, they were learning about who they are, and it was a history class. So why is it so important that we value past? And these questions are more specific questions that are related to the topic that they are going to work on. And then, as I said, the inquiry planner is applied in this way. So the teacher brings the issues of refugees. When we are learning about something, it is always good to make some connections between what I am learning or what we are learning with the real world. So the teacher brought the issues of refugees. So in the beginning of the unit, they were talking about what do I think about refugees? What do others think? Why do others think that? What does the Catholic Church think? And the lesson flows out like this. So what do I think? So they are talking about, so there's made a transition from the refugees to the first fleet. So the first fleet means like the ones who came from the European countries to Australia. So the first fleet provocation, and then they are definitely learning about the first fleet using those inquiry processes. And at the end of the lesson, so after they learned, they say, what do I think now? So they started reflecting on what they have been learning, and then possibly, if they have more questions, they start working or talking more about them. They also have one project that is called the Genius Hour. Every child or maybe a group of students pick or create an inquiry questions, and then they are conducting their own inquiry and then seek for their own answers. Definitely, teachers provide lots of feedback during the process of conducting the inquiry, and lots of reflection and revision is done, and then the students will present their findings. And I know that Korean teachers are wonderful, and I know that they are doing a great job, but sometimes also we are looking at international practices. Wow, they are doing a great job, but I think we are doing a great job too. So I wanted to interview some of the teachers, and they said, when I am planning the instruction, I try to analyze the achievement standards first. And then after I analyze, I come up with a certain task. The task can be an individual one, can be a group one, and then I am coming up with the lesson ideas. So they come up with the task first, and then plan out the lesson activities so that the students can successfully complete the task. And I think it is also important that teachers clarify what their students want to learn from the activities and then why they are learning it. So what they are going to do and then why they are doing it. And they say, we are trying to do lots of participatory activities, but many people kind of criticize, like, okay, the participatory activities are fun, but it may lack rigor. But what she was saying is, but I think we can overcome the misconception through elaborate learning. And this shows her in the frustration. She's like, I'm a social studies teacher. I should help my students to be an informed and active citizen, but they are just worried about their test scores. So that's where her frustration started out. And but she said, okay, and I decided to use a project method. It's related to their life, and then so that they can realize what they can and they should do. And I think teacher D does lots of the group work or the group projects, so that our students can experience the process of negotiation, conflict resolution, and the decision making. So the selection type test items tended to ask them to recall facts. So she tried to make or the create a problem, the test items that are related to real life and have them apply the concepts in solving the problem. As for the performance assessment, teacher A used lots of students report, discussion, portfolio. But what I think is also important is that we have to be very clear about how they're going to be scored. It's not about the scoring itself. It's more about what should I be able to do if I did it successfully. And also, it's a great tool for communication with the students as well as with the parents. And we were also talking about some of the positive changes, and the teacher B says the students who had usually were not so active in the classroom, they really participated. And then it led to reducing the gap between high achieving students and the low achieving students. And definitely they better understand some of the abstract concepts and the principles. So these are some of the positive changes that they were able to experience. However, we definitely have some of the challenges. The first teacher is say like, oh, but you know what, sometimes it's so hard to plan assessment based on what I actually did because because the standardized grade in high school, all the teachers should give the same exam, otherwise we are going to have many complaints. And so that was her problem. And in high school, the colleges got the ability test. It makes it so hard, because everyone is so much concerned about the test and the test scores. But if I do something different, they feel like, okay, does it really help for my career, for my academics? So these are some of the, some of the continuing changes. So this is just my own conclusion. You definitely have your own conclusion, just based on what I observed and what I did the analysis of the curriculum documents. I just concluded, okay, the inquiry is not just a teaching method. Sometimes we are thinking inquiry is a teaching strategy or a specific teaching method. It's a more way of organizing our thinking and organizing our teaching and learning. So like we are gathering lots of information from different sources, and then we are trying to come up with certain solutions, and then we are trying to reflect on what I found out and what I can do further. And in the classroom, effective communication with the students, they should be able to clear about why they are learning it and what they're going to do. So what they are going to do and they can do with what they learned. So it has a lot to do with, so that's why we have the acronym like from knowledge to action. And the teachers provoke thinking through the inquiry questions. So the questions play a big role in the inquiry processes.
자, 마무리하죠.
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry. So these are some of the questions that I came up with, but I think definitely you have more questions. So thank you very much for listening.